Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to kick off today's presentation with the title, The Address. We'll be exploring some important ideas and insights that I believe you'll find valuable. In this session, we'll cover the key points behind the title, give you a brief overview of what's to come, and set the stage for an engaging discussion. So let's get started. Let's take a closer look at the contents listed on this slide. These are the main sections we'll explore in the presentation. Starting with about the writer, we'll get some background on the author and their perspective. Moving on to some idea about the chapter, we'll understand the overall theme and setting of the chapter. Then, War in Holland covers the historical context that influences the story. Next, we have After the War, which discusses the aftermath and its impact. Part 1, the first meeting, introduces the initial interaction between characters, setting the stage for the story. Mrs. S's daughter's decision highlights a pivotal moment that shows personal choices and their consequences. Following that, Part 2, Remembering the Past, delves into memories that shape the character's actions. Confrontation marks a key turning point where tensions come to the surface. Key dialogue emphasizes important conversations that reveal character motivations. Part 3, The Second Visit, continues the story with another significant encounter. And She Left describes a moment of departure that has emotional weight. Question Bank suggests a set of questions for reflection or discussion, helping us deepen our understanding. And finally, Important Questions ties everything together by encouraging us to think critically about the themes and messages in the chapter. Throughout this presentation, we're connecting these points to see how personal decisions, historical context, and key interactions shape the narrative and its themes. Let's start by talking about the person behind the stories, Marga Minko. She was born as Sarah Menko on March 31, 1920 in Ginneken, which is in the Netherlands. As you can see in the picture from 1981, she has had a long and influential career. She writes primarily in Dutch and is known both as a journalist and a writer. Her choice of the pen name, Marga Minko, is quite well known and has become synonymous with her literary voice. Throughout her life, her work has often reflected her personal experiences and the history of her time, especially considering the impact of World War II on her life. Understanding her background helps us appreciate the depth and authenticity of her storytelling, which is a key part of our overall theme today, exploring personal histories and their significance. This is a story about a girl whose mother, Mrs. S., entrusted their belongings to a woman named Mrs. Dorling during World War II. Unfortunately, during the war, Mrs. S. passed away, but her daughter survived. At first, she thought about leaving her mother's belongings behind, believing it would help her remember the good old times. However, she also feared she might regret that decision later. Eventually, curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to see what was left of her mother's belongings. But when she approached Mrs. Dorling, she was met with coldness. Mrs. Dorling acted as if she didn't know her and tried to avoid her. This made things difficult, and she struggled to get her belongings back. When she finally found them, the objects brought back vivid memories of her past life, her childhood, her mother, those times she cherished. But in the end, she realized holding onto these memories was holding her back. So she made the difficult choice to leave everything behind and move forward. This story really highlights the importance of letting go sometimes, especially when holding on prevents us from embracing new beginnings. It connects to the broader theme of growth, resilience, and the power of moving on from the past. Let's take a closer look at the war in Holland. This was a pivotal moment in the broader conflict, and it had significant implications for the region. The war was characterized by intense battles and strategic maneuvers as different factions vied for control. One of the key points to remember is how this conflict reflected the larger struggles of power and influence during that time. It also highlighted the resilience of the Dutch people, who fought fiercely to defend their independence. Connecting this to our overall theme, the war in Holland illustrates how regional conflicts can shape the course of history and influence broader political dynamics. It's a perfect example of how local battles can have far-reaching consequences. In this scene, Mrs. Dorling expresses her concern about helping a Jewish family, questioning whether she might get into trouble for her actions. Mrs. S responds by advising her to be cautious and suggests that she should give all her valuable belongings to her, since she might be asked to leave her current situation at any moment and could lose everything. Mrs. Dorling then thanks Mrs. S sincerely, emphasizing how much she appreciates her help, calling it a significant favor. Mrs. S reassures her that it's no trouble at all, highlighting the importance of friendship and support during difficult times. She insists that Mrs. Dorling store her belongings at her house on Marconi Street, house number 26. This exchange underscores the themes of trust, friendship, and the risks involved in supporting those in danger during such a perilous period. Connecting this to the overall theme, it shows how acts of kindness and solidarity were crucial for survival, even in the face of fear and uncertainty. Mrs. S is dead, but her daughter survives. After the war, life changed dramatically for their family. Despite the loss, her daughter carried on, symbolizing resilience and hope for the future. This highlights how, even in the face of tragedy, the human spirit endures and adapts. It also emphasizes the importance of remembering those we've lost while honoring the legacy they leave behind. This moment connects to our overall theme of perseverance and the enduring strength of family through difficult times. So, in this part of the story, we see that Mrs. S's daughter made a decision to bring back her mother's belongings from Mrs. Dorling. This might seem like a simple act, but it actually carries a lot of emotional and practical significance. It highlights the care and concern she has for her mother, especially in this context where her mother's belongings are at risk or in limbo. This decision also ties into the overall theme of family and the importance of preserving personal connections and memories. It shows a proactive step to ensure her mother's belongings are kept safe, and perhaps also reflects a desire to reconnect or reclaim a part of her mother's life. By choosing to bring back the belongings, her daughter is not just handling material things, but also asserting a form of agency and responsibility. It's a small but meaningful act that speaks volumes about family bonds and the importance of safeguarding personal history. In this scene, Mrs. Dorling is acting as if she doesn't recognize her and is deliberately avoiding Mrs. S's daughter. It's a clear sign that she's trying to distance herself or perhaps hide something. The girl, on her part, is trying to reclaim her belongings, which shows her attempt to hold on to her past life. When she finally finds her possessions, they don't just hold physical value, they evoke deep memories of who she once was. This moment is powerful because it highlights the emotional weight of her past. Ultimately, she chooses to leave everything behind, signaling her decision to move forward and embrace a new chapter. This confrontation underscores a key theme of the story: the struggle between holding onto the past and making a fresh start. It's a reminder that sometimes, in order to move on, we have to let go of what's familiar and what once defined us. And she left. This slide marks a pivotal moment in our story, highlighting the departure of a key figure. It's not just about someone walking away, it's about understanding the significance of that decision. When she left, it symbolized a turning point, a shift in dynamics and priorities. It forces us to ask ourselves what prompted her departure. Was it a disagreement, a change in vision, or perhaps a response to external pressures? This moment underscores how individual actions can ripple through a larger system, affecting teams, projects, and even the overall mission. It reminds us that change is inevitable, and sometimes it's necessary for growth. As we connect this point to the broader theme, think about how departures like these can serve as catalysts for reflection and transformation within organizations. In the beginning of the story, I want to share how I faced a cold reception when I returned to my native place after the war, searching for my mother's belongings. I went to house number 46 on Marconi Street and rang the bell. When a woman opened the door, I introduced myself, but she just kept staring at me silently. There was no sign of recognition on her face. I noticed she was wearing my mother's green knitted cardigan, which confirmed to me that I was at the right place. I asked her if she knew my mother, and she couldn't deny it. I wanted to talk to her and learn more, but she cautiously closed the door before I could get any further. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of that silence, and then I decided to leave. This encounter highlights the initial shock and emotional distance that can come with revisiting our past, especially under such difficult circumstances. As I delve into these memories, I start to piece together my past. My mother had given me an address years ago during the war, which I never really thought much about at the time. I went back home for a few days, but to my surprise, I noticed that several things were missing from our house. That's when my mother told me about Mrs. Dorling, an old acquaintance of hers. Recently, she had reconnected with her, and Mrs. Dorling had been visiting regularly. What struck me was that every time she left, she took something with her. She explained that she wanted to save all our nice possessions, but it seemed more like she was taking them for herself. The next day, I saw her leaving the house with a heavy suitcase, and I caught a fleeting glimpse of her face. I was curious, so I asked my mother if Mrs. Dorling lived far away. That's when she told me the address, number 46, Marconi Street. After the war, my curiosity grew. I wanted to understand what might still be left at that address, what possessions could still be there. So, driven by that desire, I decided to go to number 46, Marconi Street, to see for myself what was there and to uncover the truth behind those missing items. So, in the concluding part of the story, I recount my second visit to that place. After my first attempt didn't yield any results, I decided to go back once more. Interestingly, this time it was a 15-year-old girl who answered the door. Her mother wasn't home, so I asked if I could wait for her. The girl kindly accompanied me to the passage. As I looked around, I noticed an old-fashioned iron candle holder hanging next to a mirror. She then made me sit in the living room before going inside. What happened next was quite unsettling. I found myself in a room that I knew, yet it felt unfamiliar. It was filled with familiar objects I longed to see again, but the strange atmosphere made them seem unsettling rather than comforting. I felt a strange mix of longing and discomfort, like I wanted to look around, but something held me back. I no longer had the desire to possess those objects. Instead, I felt a strange detachment. Eventually, I got up, walked to the door, and left. That experience reinforced my decision to forget the address and move on. It was a moment that made me realize how certain places and memories can evoke complex feelings, sometimes comfort, sometimes unease, and how important it is to know when to let go. The short story revolves around number 46, Marconi Street. It begins with the address where a Jewish family suffered during a difficult time, and it ends with the narrator forgetting the address altogether. This progression highlights how memories linked to certain places can fade over time, especially after trauma or change. Now, regarding the justification of the title, the narrator visits to collect her belongings. These items evoke nostalgic feelings, but they also remind her that the true owner is no longer there. The objects stored in Mrs. Dorling's house remind her of uncharitable Mrs. Dorling and her own tragic past. Ultimately, she feels it is better to forget these memories and move on. You might wonder, why did the narrator resolve to forget the address, number 46, Marconi Street? Well, she came back without claiming her belongings because she realized that objects connected to our memories tend to lose their value when seen after some time, especially in unfamiliar surroundings. For example, her silver cutlery and clothes lost their charm when viewed in Mrs. Dorling's house. She understood that if she took these items back, they would seem strange and disconnected in her small, new rented room. So, forgetting became a way to let go. And why does she come back without claiming her belongings? The second time she visits, she is taken inside by Mrs. Dorling's daughter. When she enters the room, she's immediately horrified by what she sees. The room is filled with all her belongings, which Mrs. Dorling had taken away at the start of the war. Although she initially felt she knew the room because it was filled with her things, she soon realizes it isn't truly her space anymore. The way things are kept and arranged make her feel she does not really know the room. When she says, "I was in a room I knew and did not know," she's expressing this complex feeling. It's a paradox. She recognizes the objects, the space, but at the same time, it feels unfamiliar because it's no longer hers. The room is both familiar and strange, symbolizing how memories and physical spaces can change or become distant over time. On this slide, we see that items associated with her past reminded her of her tragic experience, which prompted her to resolve to leave them behind and forget the address. This shows how the memories tied to those possessions were painful, and she decided it was better to move on. After Mrs. S. died, the daughter returned to visit Mrs. Dorling at number 46, Marconi Street, bringing the story full circle. In Holland, a Jewish family, including Mrs. S., suffered disruption of their lives as they left town to seek safety. This highlights the impact of war on ordinary families and their struggles to survive. The war profoundly changed the narrator's life, resulting in the loss of her mother and her precious possessions. These losses are central to understanding her emotional journey. The Address is a story that explores human predicament following war, how people cope with loss, trauma, and the remnants of their past. Mrs. Dorling, during her interactions, reveals her unkind character by refusing to recognize the narrator. Later, during her second visit, the narrator finds Mrs. Dorling's daughter, discovers her belongings, and recalls her mother's memories. Mrs. Dorling's uncharitable behavior, along with the stored items, unsettles her. These objects serve as painful reminders of her mother's memories and her past. It's important to note that Mrs. Dorling took advantage of the situation, seizing their valuable items. She took things away, and the narrator doubted her integrity. Mrs. S. and her family left their town for safety reasons. She died, and her daughter returned to tell her tragic story. Wars always bring death and destruction. They leave scars that cannot simply be erased. In the end, she becomes nostalgic and resolves to forget her tragic past, deciding to leave the address behind and not reclaim her belongings. After the war, the narrator returns to reclaim her possessions, but before the war, she had returned home only to find things missing. War affects the fortunes of many, leaving them to rebuild their lives from loss and devastation. The story, The Address, is divided into pre-war and post-war times, and it's crucial to consider the hardships the girl endured during these periods. The cruel words of Mrs. Dorling give us important clues about the story. The narrative is set after the devastating Second World War, when millions of Jews faced the horrors of the Holocaust. The narrator is likely a survivor of the concentration camps, having lost her family, but surviving to return and reclaim her belongings. Mrs. Dorling's statement, "Have you come back? I thought that no one had come back," implies that she believed no one from the family had survived, which underscores the horror and loss experienced during the war. This line highlights the deep emotional and historical context of the story, reminding us of the profound trauma caused by war and genocide. As I approach the house, I suddenly hear a door opening and closing behind Mrs. Dorling, signaling that there is someone else inside. It's clear there's someone she's eager to keep away from me. I realize she doesn't want me inside the house at all. I leave feeling disappointed, unable to retrieve my possessions. Throughout history, the impact of war on civilians has been depicted in many books and movies, like The Diary of a Young Girl, Anne Frank, Sarah's Key by Tatiana de Rosny, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne, and the film Schindler's List. These stories show the deep suffering caused by concentration camps and the heartbreaking loss of loved ones, leaving everlasting scars. My observations highlight a stark contrast: the light-colored bread and familiar views I see here versus the coarse, stale food, barren land, and constant threat of death in the camps. After my first failed attempt, I try again. This time, Mrs. Dorling isn't home. I'm greeted instead by her 15-year-old daughter, who is oblivious to the memories tied to the antiques in this house. When I realize that my things have become part of someone else's life, I decide not to reclaim them. The memories attached to these items are overwhelming and no longer belong in my new life. Eventually, I find the strength to move on. I believe that among all the memories left behind by the war, the address with my mother's belongings is the easiest to forget. After that first unsuccessful visit, I reflect on why I delayed returning for her things. The war and losing my family weighed heavily on my heart. Each item stirred up memories filled with fear and hesitation, making me hesitant to face them sooner. the pain of loss held me back. My mother, who seemed naive, didn't suspect Mrs. Dorling of any hidden motives. She was more worried about Mrs. Dorling's safety while transporting our belongings back to Marconi Street. She asked me to remember Mrs. Dorling's address, just in case I was the only survivor of the war. Walking back to the train station, I recall how, during the early years of World War II, I found several household items missing when I returned home from university. My mother told me that Mrs. Dorling, an old acquaintance, had insisted on keeping our things safe during the war. I also remember briefly seeing Mrs. Dorling leaving with yet another batch of our possessions. As I approach, I realize I've arrived at the right address because Mrs. Dorling is wearing my mother's sweater, clearly worn often. The house at 46 Marconi Street belongs to her. When she opens the door, it's only a crack, and she seems not to recognize me. She treats me with cold civility. During this brief interaction, I come to 3 important realizations. But more than anything, I understand that these moments connect to the bigger picture, the ongoing theme of loss, memory, and moving forward after the war. Let's take a closer look at the character traits of the narrator. Throughout the story, she comes across as observant and reflective, yet also somewhat passive and possibly resigned. Her lack of a name is significant. It suggests that she represents a more universal or anonymous perspective, allowing us to focus on her insights rather than her individual identity. This anonymity invites us to think about how many people might experience similar feelings or situations without ever becoming specifically identified. Now, turning to Mrs. Dorling, I see her as a stark portrayal of the corrupt human mind. She embodies greed, selfishness, and a kind of moral blindness that prioritizes her own interests above everything else. Her actions reveal a tendency to manipulate and exploit others, which serves as a commentary on the darker aspects of human nature. As for her daughter, I think she might represent innocence or perhaps the next generation that could either be corrupted by this environment or potentially rise above it. Her character prompts us to consider the impact of such a corrupt setting on young minds and the possibility of change or resilience. Overall, these characters help us explore the broader themes of morality, human weakness, and the complex nature of good and evil in society. They challenge us to reflect on our own perceptions and the ways in which corruption can subtly or overtly influence us all. So I've managed to come back from somewhere very dark and terrible. Where have I come back from? From the Nazi concentration camps, the death camps, the gas chambers, and even from the jaws of death itself. It's a journey through unimaginable horror, and yet I am here to tell the story. Now, what changes in normalcy does this story address? Well, for example, the lighter-colored bread that we see today. Back then, during the war, it was darker, especially for Jews. These small details, like the color of bread, highlight how life was altered, how even the simplest things took on new meaning under such circumstances. Is this story effective in painting the horrific picture of the Nazi atrocities? I believe it is. It aims to bring to life the inhumanity faced by European Jews during the Second World War, things that are hard to imagine, but crucial to remember. It's about capturing that brutality and the suffering inflicted upon innocent people. Why do I say I knew and did not know the things? It's a way of expressing the complex reality. Sometimes I knew what was happening on a surface level, but I didn't fully grasp the depth of the horror, the extent of the suffering, or I couldn't process it all at once. It's about the coexistence of awareness and denial, a defense mechanism, perhaps, that many of us experienced. I want you to understand the pain of loss, frustration, and helplessness that lived inside me. These feelings are overwhelming: losing family, losing hope, feeling powerless against forces so cruel. It's a heavy burden that stays with me, shaping who I am and how I see the world.